How's it going, YouTube? Coming at you today with another video, and today, guys, what the brand new is going to be the complete guide to Rikka Sunavalon. Now, if you know me and you know how much I love this deck, it's really cool. There's a lot of different options. Now, plants might be a bit underrated in the format just because, especially the support level that we're getting for the deck isn't really high. I do hope that we get a lot of support in the future, but the deck itself is doing a lot. And I'm here with an expert today to show you exactly what the deck can do. So if you want to go ahead and say hello and introduce yourself, Jessica.
Hi, so I'm Jess. I recently topped the 250th YCS London with Plant. I also topped European Championships with Plant. I made the deck list that won. I've made deck lists for any UK player who's topped with Plants. I've likely had like a large input on the deck list. I've recently started doing YouTube videos as well, and just want to share some knowledge.
Definitely go ahead and check out Sunseedjess over on YouTube and Twitter if you haven't already. So today we're going to be covering a lot of the different competitive aspects of Rikka Sunavalon. And if you know anything about the channel, you know that that's the one thing I really like to focus on is really going ahead and making sure that everyone knows the best thing that there is to do with every single deck that there is to play. So we've covered decks like Salad, Branded, now Plant, and Monodome, and etc. Just so many different decks, and I really want to make sure that whatever deck that you pick up, that there is a guide for it, and then you know exactly what the cards do, and then you also know some of the comprehensive combos that the deck can put up. So if you haven't already checked out my sponsors on the channel too, on Gem, Imperium Duelist, Dragon Shield, all down in the description below, definitely go ahead and check them all out. And without further ado, let's hop right on into our first topic. The first thing I want to talk about today is going to be the Sunavalon cards in the deck, if you want to go ahead and cover those.
So you mean three Snavlon cards or two monsters, which is Sunseed Twin and obviously Loci. So Loci, you have six copies of in main deck technically because you've got third expected die, three Loci. But you can also search it off of Glamour, summon it off of Lone Fire. You'll get to your Loci in I think it came to about 80 high 80% of hands. Um, Loci is just your like bread and butter starter. Loci alone is your full combo. So it's a kind of one card starter kind of deck. Twin is your like so-called Garnet for the deck, but it's not a super big Garnet since you can just summon it off of Snowdrop. If you normal summon it, it can roll Loci. It's just not great on its own. Twin also has a Grave Effect, which I'd like to like stress is really important in some of the combos. Uh, no one seems to know that Twin has a Grave Effect, which I think is quite funny. But and also there's the card you search, which is Sundyne Sowing, which will summon any like summon your twin, or if you don't have twins, your seed from your deck.
I think it's really funny. Just we have this vanilla monster, and everyone's like, "Vanillas are so bad." And it's like, have you met Loki yet?
Yeah, Loci is just like it does so much with one card. You can do like I feel like Loci can probably do almost anything in the game, just because like you'd have to play more bricks, but there's so many resources that this card just gets to. In combination with things like Aromatherapy Jasmine, which just gets everything planned.
Yeah, Jasmine is definitely probably the most broken card in this. Just being able to summon any plant, there's just so much that you can do with that for sure.
The argument is either Jasmine's first broken card or Dryas, which is the card that Loci will link into, because it isn't once per turn. So you could search 4 or 5 times per turn if you wanted to. And especially if when people are summoning hard negates, uh, sowing sowing is activate once per turn. So if they negate it with, for example, a Hyperiton or a Baron, you can then just use another one if you can make a second Dryas to search, which is always like really valuable.
Yeah, not once per turn. It's a cool thing to have.
Especially with I think we'll go over more Dryas later, but being able to just attack like even if they Ash or that kind of thing to your Dryas, the good thing about Loci is because everyone knows now that Loci is such a powerful card alone, they will do anything they can to stop Loci, and then you can just get Loci through your Rika engine or get Loci through another engine or another method. Your game plan essentially relies on going first, you'll rely on resolving your Loci combo. But going second, you're using your Loci combo to bait out your opponent, and then use your other engines and other resources just to blow them out and win the game.
Yeah, the Rikka cards are definitely good at doing so. So let's go ahead and talk about these first two here.
So we've got Princess and Petal here. Um, Princess is one of the Poke cards. It can probably got a bit of a shout at first with Poke, with like Sprite and Tears coming out. Um, so Princess is your free extender. It just summons itself. And then in graveyard and hand, it's a hand trap. If you control a Rika by attributing a plant monster, or with Concon, your opponent's monsters. We'll get to that later. That card is insane. It being a free extender means that it's a free level 4 for your XYZ plays. it's a free way into Dryas. So if you open the sewing, or if you want to just crash or get a free link material, you can just make the Dryas. Uh, Petal is probably the heart and soul of like the grind game. So Petal, once per turn, you can either search or send a Rikka monster, which is you need to note that it can send, which means under draw you can then send your princess to get a negate. Also during each opponent's end phases, it reborns itself, which is and then it gets your Mudan, which can then get your Concom, which can get that Glamour, which then gets the rank 4, which then gets anything from Grave. And you can just infinitely cycle resources and just demolish the grind game with this one card that reborns itself every end phase.
Yeah, the card is pretty insane. Just being able to just reborn itself, it can get pretty annoying because there's a lot of cards that say, like it just comes back and then you're like, well, now I have to deal with this again. And so usually you have to just expend resources trying to get rid of it out of the grave, especially even when you're playing like tier back last format and you really had to focus on like keeping a shuffler in the grave, at least for Princess and for the petals, so they didn't come back.
So one thing to note with this comeback as well is, unlike I think everything else in the format that comes back like this, it's not light or dark, so your deck is pretty much immune to Bestials.
Yeah, that's really good too. That was another really cool call as well, just because of the fact that you can dodge those. That's where like when Crow becomes relevant again, then of course that card is just really nice too. But even Princess with the interaction with Con, I think is probably the craziest as far as things that I've seen so far.
Yeah, especially like one interaction that is pretty relevant is just with Petal. If you especially have Concom face up, with Petal being able to search out or send Princess, and then instantly able to negate, let's say, a Fenrir resolution or a Rise Heart resolution or that kind of thing, it's just really valuable. Um, and being able to get Petal being able to get anything in your engine is just insane because it can get your rank 8 players, it can get your rank 4 players, it can get your Concon, it can get extenders, it can get more starters. The great thing about Plant is that the majority of Plant cards are become every other Plant card.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool too because a lot of the plant cards, again, there's not a ton of them. That's one thing that I was really looking forward to was like hopefully plant support in the future. And so that's something where just the minimal amount that we do have, they all do work together pretty well. That's one thing actually really funny. I'm playing Balbaboon and Monodome, so that's my favorite plant card. But what's your favorite plant card?
It has to be Lokai.
Lokai,
I
that's
don't
fair.
just summoning a vanilla and then just like the idea of it just sprouting into a Dryas and then just getting this giant board just is too funny to me.
Yeah, it's really cool, and like a lot of different ways you can play the deck, which is really nice. That's what I really like is utility in a deck in different ways you can go about your combo.
Yeah, especially with Plant because you've got these because there's such like versatility, especially with the Rika cards. It's a good example of versatility because you can search so many different things for the battle and do so many different routes. It's never aside from like your one like linear combo, there's so many different routes and so much room for technical play, and it really rewards good players. And it really rewards learning the deck well.
Absolutely, and there's a lot to keep track of too. And so that's one thing that's really nice. And then being plant locked so early on, and there's a lot of different things that you really got to make sure that you are checking into. And that's one thing that I do hope that we get is future plant support that does not plant lock you super fast, so we can at least put up like a Baron or something. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, so we've done in previous builds with like I think the Nationals last year builds, we were playing Baron because we didn't have the Rika cards yet. So we were summoning Baron and then using Necrosynchron to summon Lokai from deck and then doing the Melius combo with two Melius, which I thought was a really neat way to do it. So there's definitely like because you don't have to start with the plants, it locks you for the rest of the turn. There's definitely like routes we can take, especially as there's more future support. There's definitely routes we can take that would just get more free resources that could maybe set up a Baron before the combo or that kind of thing.
It's kind of crazy how every combo deck just kind of boils down to Baron.
Yeah, I think in the previous builds, I think Necrosynchron, like funny enough, was actually designed for Baron. I think that is like the what's it called? That is like the Baron archetype tuner, which I thought actually using that for Lokai was like pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice too. Just Baron in general is such a utility in itself. A monster reborn, a destruction, an omni negate. Like, what more could you ask for? And it's such a good card. It conveniently level 10 too for a lot of the different like red rose plays we used to do. But just such a good card. So definitely really cool for a lot of the combo decks. But talking more so about the higher level monsters in this deck, and especially Mudan, because this card is nuts in the deck. What do these cards really do for the deck, and then how crazy are these cards?
So these aren't really extendery ones. Mudan, I think, is probably my favorite Rika, because whenever it's quite a simple effect. Whenever it's summoned, you can search a Rika spell or trap. That searches your ideally that searches Concon, or Glamour or Sheep, whatever you need. Uh, it's majority Concon. More time you get Concon because then you can go Concon and get more spells and traps. But especially since Concon is such a potent interrupt, your opponent's always trying to remove the Concon, so just getting more is just always valuable. And Snowdrop is, I think, the least understood Rika card. So people know what it does, but they don't understand how to use it properly, especially in a grind game. I think that's one mistake that a lot of plant players make. So Snowdrop, you tribute a monster, summon it from hand, summon the plant. For the level manipulation effect, you quite often, I will in the full combo, you will use it to make 4 level 4s, so you can make double Strenna, but you can also make rank 8s. Going second, it gets you straight into a rank 8, which is attribute opponent's monster. It can go for Strenna, which means that if you princess negate something, you can then tribute off the Strenna, get your teardrop, and then get tribute and negate. It's great. It's just a great and very versatile extender.
Yeah, and that's one thing too is with the Mudan, again, just having only the one tribute so you can trade really well. Especially like for example, if you're comboing and then your Dryas gets negated, you can then tribute Dryas, and then if you have another way to get like a Loci on the board, you can then go Loci back into Dryas to go ahead and get the search for like your spell. So there's a lot of different ways you can utilize the Mudan, especially even Snowdrop. Snowdrop's really cool too. We used to play the Mardell. It's just another way to get it out of your hand if you were in a really weird position. So you can go ahead and get another search as well. But overall, the utility of both these cards are really important.
So I think one thing that's actually you brought up a good point there, which is something loci. So if you let's say, I think in case of Mudan, if you unexpected die, summon loci, and then summon Dryas and it gets impermed, you could then distribute it with Mudan, summon Mudan, search Glamour or Concon, depends if you want to be locked into plants or not, because of Regulus. You then get Glamour, tribute the Mudan, search Petal plus loci, and then you have multiple loci, and you can then combo again. The exact same thing you're looking with Snowdrop. You can if you're imperm or you get impermed on your Dryas, you can Snowdrop, tribute Dryas, summon Snowdrop, summon another loci, and then just keep going.
Yeah, it's so good, and that's one thing too that I caught on to really fast when I was playing the deck. I was like, yeah, so like imperm, it hurts, but it doesn't hurt that bad. So definitely really cool, and I really like the fact that the deck now doesn't really play like the continuous spell because I used to think that was like super mandatory whenever we were doing like full combo, putting up like 4 interruptions. But now it's just like the deck has evolved already so much, so it's definitely cool to see.
Yeah, Shrine is neat, but because you don't need we're not like too as link focused anymore. So we do some link plays, but it's more focused on your general resources and your spell trap interrupts and like your couple of XYZs that you don't need the random level one extender as much, which just means you can just play less bricks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing too that we were running into a wall on as far as like what do we cut or like what do we really add. But this is also before a lot of the new like Rikka support as well. So definitely really cool to see where the deck is going. And we have mentioned Concon quite a bit. So let's go ahead and cover what this card does and what she does.
So Concon is the it's the best card in the deck, I think,
Yeah.
by far. Concon allows you to tribute an opponent's monster as cost for any Rika effects that would be a plant. And it also lets you set once per turn you control Rika, you can set any Rika spell or trap from your deck. So this allows you to get you can get Rota, which is you can get double Rota, which is Clamor, and then treat opponent's monster as cost. You can get to Sheet. So Sheet is essentially Crackdown. Sheet is Crackdown that contribute a monster as cost to be able to take, and it becomes a plant, which is pretty notable if you play, for example, Rivalry. It doesn't care about Rivalry because it becomes a plant when it's on your field and then goes back to their field. Concon, in general, Concon's just it's a board breaker because they, especially if they can't let it resolve, because if it resolves, it's going to contribute as cost when they can't respond. So it's a board breaker. It's an extender because it gets glamour. If you're starting with it's an interrupt because you're getting sheet set, Concon is pretty much everything you could possibly want in one card. Also, funny enough, it's actually if they do like the 9 zone lock in Kashtira, for example, Concon just outs that.
Yeah, the Con being able to get to Glamour and distributing off a monster immediately, it's kind of insane. Just being like, yeah, so this is these are my monsters now to use. It's so good. Like I just remember that card coming down on me. I'm playing Striker, and the first time I read it, I was like, oh, this like tribute Shizuku. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, it's just I think for a card, Concon is so insanely versatile, and it really just meshes everything together. Especially since Glamour as a card can add your Eureka and any other plant at the same time, which I think, especially post side, which is a bit of spoilers, but post side, this that's very relevant. But it can add Loci plus Petal, which is Rika Engine plus Loci Engine. It can add Lily Borea plus Snowdrop. It can add, which is both engines, like Therion and Rika. Then you can add Primula plus Princess, which is an instant rank 4, because Primula will trigger on resolution if monsters being tributed. There's just a lot you can do with this, like with these spells that all intermingle with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And these cards are really good, especially the ones in the extra deck that we're seeing. Strona being such a key piece in a lot of the plays. Even if you're in a really awkward position and you don't have your still having Sheet to tribute a Strona and then go ahead and take a monster too. Also very strong. Having Jasmine, this card just is in the e-telly for any card out of your deck that says plant on it. These cards are really good.
Obviously, Jasmine is, I think, because we've got the new combo lines now where we're triggering Jasmine to search twice as well as summoning. Jasmine is so much better than just an e-telly because Jasmine is because you're especially with Mudan and Princess and Snowdrop and Primula, all basically all your recall to summoning themselves for hand for free. And with things like Unexpected Die, meaning you can stop that your normal summon. Jasmine searching multiple monsters just opens up. But it's the exact same as a summon from deck. It feels like 3 summons from deck, which is just absurd.
Yeah, I really do like Jasmine a lot. This card's really crazy. Just a lot of the different plays. Again, like the old line of play was always going ahead and summoning out like the Loci and the Twin, Tribute Twin, summon Mardell, add the Laurel, summon the Laurel, go into Jasmine, sending the Laurel, add twice. It was always just really good. But now, again, there's a lot less bricks. You don't have to play cards like that anymore. But I think that's still really cool just to show off what Jasmine can do.
Yeah, so the neat thing about like the current lines is because originally like before pre-Rika we did play those lines, or I did personally. And next week we're all around those lines, but now because we've with the new lines, we're just going Jasmine and then we're going Healer and Dryas underneath first to search. So we're getting hold of a monster before we even tribute. And then we're doing that again later on the combo with Twins effect. So we're getting multiple searches, like without any additional breaks. We're just using a couple of extra X slots, which you're going to be using for those cards anyway. So it's so much advantage just pre-resources.
I did get a chance to check out your replay that you sent over, and I did see the healer up first, and I was like, that's pretty smart, because that's definitely a good way to not have to play additional bricks, or even like a second healer. You can go ahead and just do the combo, then utilizing the twin effect engrave, which we'll show off for everyone here in a moment, but definitely a smart play. So talking about some tech options in the deck, the first one I'll talk about is going to be Regulus. Now this is a card that we've been seeing in and out of the deck very frequently. It's a very strong card for what it is. Also being able to get to the Lily Borea off of your Jasmine, very strong play too. But how do you feel like Regulus really does increase the ceiling of the deck, or do you feel like it's not as needed?
So originally with like the European Championship lists, we were not playing the Theorem package with Lily Borea and Regulus. But we had also had cards like Mystic Mine around then, and Regulus didn't interact with those broken field spells. Um, the one issue people have with Regulus is I'll do the negatives before the positives. The main issue with Regulus is plant locks. When you're locked into plants, you can't swing Regulus. But on the flip side, it protects you. The one card that this deck unfortunately doesn't have an interaction with, like in Engine, is evenly matched. Theory Regulus is a free interaction with evenly matched, and you can just search Lily Borea off Jasmine, which then means Lily Borea is both an extender to get you some more link materials and treat materials, and a Regulus at the same time. And if you open the Regulus, it's absolutely fine because we play 2 Lily Borea, so we're just searching a Lily Borea with the regular field spell instead for next turn. So we're just giving ourselves a grind game. It's not really a brick. It's just a free negate that we can search any time. It's also pretty valuable going second, especially since shufflers are no longer like a thing. Like in tier format, when playing Plant, we couldn't really play Therions, mainly because shufflers just shuffling away things is was way too scary.
I feel like the shufflers are just the craziest cards, and so I feel like that's the number one thing that a lot of people might still be thinking about whenever they think about a lot of the different decks that are really showing up after tier format, is because those aren't as relevant anymore, and that was such a threat last format.
Yeah, exactly. So I think especially with Lily Boria and Regulus combined, it's both an extender for your combo that allows you to do the full combo, as well as if you hold open a Lily Boria and a Loci, for example, if you because no one will Ash Dryas. Or if they know plant, they'll never Ash Dryas, they will always Ash your sowing. So if you go Dryas Effect search, you can then summon the Liboria, Liboria send itself and get Regulus, so they can't Ash or Nib on your Dryas combo. So I think Regulus is really, especially in the hand trap usage, has increased now. I think that Regulus is increasingly important, especially when you've got some decks playing evenly and some decks playing like a load of hand traps in main. Having the free interaction with hand traps is just and that simultaneously negates evenly is way too valuable to play.
Oh, I definitely agree with that too, because there's so many different decks out there right now that are just like, we need an Omni. Shout outs to Hero. But so there's a lot of decks, they just lose to Nibiru, and it's so unfortunate, or like they lose to the solo blowout card. And I really do feel like if you have the ability to play a card like Regulus, especially so searchable in this deck, it's probably a good idea just to run it.
I think one of the really cool thing, which isn't Regulus but Disc Coliseum, because I know Tom Rose was a big fan of this, which is Disc Coliseum protecting your monsters from battle, is really really synergistic with Dryas' effect. So when you take damage, Dryas can gain back the damage, and then summon a Sunlight from extra deck. That's synergizing really well with Disc Coliseum, being able to protect monsters from battle. And then the Boris being a plant extender, which is also level 8 for Snowdrop, just makes the entire package really synergistic.
Yeah, Disc Coliseum also just has some really crazy effects for sure. I love that card just for what it was able to do, especially like in the Striker variants. Of course, I play Striker all the time outside of like Poe format, but it was really cool just to see like, oh, I'm gonna attack over Shizuku. It's like it's not dead. It's like no. So it's pretty nice to just have that kind of an option. And definitely good for protecting the board, so you don't have to like waste any negations or bounces or anything right away, just to be able to like keep your board together essentially.
Yeah, especially like post side when we're siding things like Rose Whip. If you end on it, it's really fine. If you don't have access to Concon, ending on that's fine because it still protects your board. And then, yeah, I think another thing with Regulus actually is even if though it's not a plant, it's still a free body. So this means that let's say you open a really bad hand, but you have access to, let's say, a plant, let's say Primula, which is like your worst week to draw, and a Liboria, you can still go Primula into Dryas, summon a Liboria, search out the Regulus, make Jasmine, summon Regulus, and then tribute off the Regulus to get your Lone Fire, and then you can do full like Rika plant combo. So even though Regulus isn't a machine, it can still be tributed, so it still acts as an extender and an interrupt and protection at the same time. It's just a very good package just that incorporates everything you might want.
Sometimes you literally have to put your opponent on, you better have it, just like if you have the rock, you have the rock. If you have the evenly, you have it. But I'm gonna full combo. So like getting rid of the negation, I've had to do it a couple times, especially playing like Math Mac, and you have to get rid of like the Laplacian negate just to be able to keep going. It's a little awkward, but at the same time, you're just like, all right, cool. Like we just need a combo.
It's especially with like Nibiru and stuff, it's quite often used after they've used their interrupts. And you don't know you don't have that much left, but having just a free extender you should be off is just so valuable.
Yeah, and there is one more that I do want to talk about, and that's going to be that Dry Teneri. Now, Dry Teneri is such a cool card, and having Bloom, of course, being the Equimax effect, and then having like the Blanket Dark Ruler effect too, definitely really cool for the engine. But I don't really see it used a ton nowadays. Why do you believe this is?
So originally in I think it was around June 2022, when we were building nationals deck lists, we were playing this in the old like punk version of Planet before the Weakers. It's really good at giving you a big monster, and honestly, I wish I could play it right now. But unfortunately, it's as the decks become less link based and more just summoning bigger monsters, like summoning more main deck and like Rika based, there's been less space for Giantess to actually just exist. Because in the extra deck has become increasingly tight because you'll go through upwards of 11, 12, 13 cards for your full combo, and the remaining cards you want to be able to have follow up. And Giantess was very much like a win more kind of card, especially with your now you're ending on like eight up to eight, nine negates. The Giantess is just this optional extra thing that it requires you to pay a brick, unfortunately. Even though as good as Bloom is, it's still a brick.
Yep.
And then it's yeah. And because your deck is so inherently good at the destruction effect of Giantess is great. But unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but because Concon is so good at doing just breaking through boards as well, it's kind of become a little bit inundated. The one good thing about Grand Theft that may come in future formats, though, is that it can pop back row, essentially. So if we get into a very back row heavy format, the card may come back as just a blur against back row decks.
Yeah, just the ability to go non-targeting is always my favorite. It's the best.
Yeah, as long as you get a back row deck that isn't heavily reliant on skill drain.
Yeah, that's also unfortunate. That's why like the very niche interaction that a lot of people forget about is like not exactly in plant, but like having a card like Access Code and pop skill drain. That one's really cool, and a lot of people just don't expect it when it happens.
So it actually is relevant in plant for like your very traditional lone fire under skill drain ruling,
Oh yeah, that too.
which I think is quite funny that that still comes up like with plant to this day.
It's also like Ray under skill drain. It's just like it's really funny. A lot of people just forget.
Exactly, yeah.
So definitely a really cool card. Unfortunate that we don't really see a whole lot of play in it, but again, maybe in the future. So we have quite a bit that we just went over, but let's go ahead and check out some replays to see exactly what the deck can do. Awesome, so we're back with the replay, and so now here we're going to be going through the deck and exactly what the combo line is. Just starting off with a Lokai and then a Rikka monster. Would you like to go ahead and start describing like some of the different combo hands you can open, and then also why Lokai plus a Rikka is so important?
Yeah, so Lokai itself is essentially a full combo. Um, so just like normal summon Lokai and then going into your Dryas or Jasmine lines and getting your searches, you could pretty much get anything from your deck, essentially. But for the full combo, you need to have any Rika monster in your hand because you'll end up going Snowdrop Effect, summoning the Mudan, and then you'll need access to level 4. So that's 3 searches, and you're only going to unfortunately have to get 2 additional searches on top of your Therian engine in this combo. So opening any like because aside from Primula is like the one brick. If you open Concon, Glamour, even Sheet, Princess, Snowdrop, Mudan, even Petal, if you put any of these cards on top of the Lokai, you'll just be able to go summon like you'll be able to do your full Lokai combo, and then at the end you'll be able to use the additional Rika card alongside the ones you search just to end on the full end board.
So go ahead and go into that link one here.
Yep, so Dryas here just like if they imperm it, never Ash Dryas, always Ash the Sowing. But here Sowing just gets you get your standard like triangle of monsters. Always use Chain Link 1 Twin is one thing to note, just because Bell exists and your Dryas, sorry, is always protected by Sowing if they have Gamma. So instead of summoning from deck here, we're linking 1 into the Dryas and the Healer to get a search from Jasmine. This allows you to get access to Lily Borea straight away, so you get like you're threatening a negate pretty early on. So here we're actually summoning the Lone Five from deck and using Lone Five to tribute off the Liboria. This means that instead of linking it off, it just means we save a Dryas in extra deck, so we don't have to link off the Dryas, we have to keep it. Yeah, now we use Petal because it locks you in for the rest of the turn. And you just grab one of the missing Rika cards.
So now we're gonna be using the twin effect in the graveyard.
Yeah, so Twin Effect will banish the Jasmine Effect monster on its cost, rewarding back the healer because you have 2 in grave. You have to summon the one that you link summoned, but that's fine. And then we'll trigger the Jasmine, which is soft once per turn to search your last Rika piece.
So now we'll go into the Melius here and add the Snowdrop.
Yes, go Melius, add some back the Loci. So You're simply doing this so that you can have a fourth monster or fourth plant monster with a level, and you summon Mudan. You need to note that we're summoning Mudan with the Snowdrop here, so that we don't have to tribute anything. This means we can then save the tribute for later, so we can trigger the Strenna. So yeah, so Snowdrop here makes everything level 4, because we're going to end up overlaying for 2 Strennas.
Okay.
So specifically, we want to overlay with those two. We want to overlay with the Mudan and the Princess. This is because we want them both to hit grave quickly, and we're going to add back the Mudan and then tribute the Strenna immediately, so we can get access to the Hyperiton, and then use the field spell to equip a spell, so that we have our spell negate as well. We set sheet from deck, and then we can overlay for Strenna with our remaining 2 level 4s, and then we have like 3 and Mudan, so we can just make the Bang Lancer. So here we have sheet, which is 1 interrupt, Regulus, which is 2, Strenna and Graveyard to summon Teardrop, which is a 3rd interrupt. Princess is a 4th engrave, Bang Lancer is a 5th, Concord Tribute is a 6th, and Hyperiton Spell Trap is a 7th. So we have plenty of interrupts that it's a wider range of interrupts as well. We've got Spell Trap, we've got Spell Interrupts, we've got Omni Negate, we've got Tributor's Cost, we've got Stat Steal. There's plenty of like a great variety of negates here, different opportunities to interrupt.
Yeah, and then the Hyperton's only a negate on your opponent's turn, correct?
Yes, it's only great during your opponent's turn, but during your turn, it can equip a card to become a different kind of negate.
It's all off 2 cards too, so you still have 3 more in hand, so that's pretty cool as well.
Yeah, which is why going first, for example, we side in Ash Blossom because it's just another card in hand to support the board because it's only a 2-card combo. Or you can end on this exact board with like without the sheet, for example, or with like 1 less component without the sheet is the main example. If you just open Loci and don't open Rikka. So you still have plenty of interrupt, even if you only have Loci. The other variation to note with this 1 combo line is the reason we're only 1 combo is because until the like last few steps, all the combos are almost identical. One thing that is worth noting is that with Rosewhip inside, for making Rosewhip combos, we'd go Strenna effect, attach, and then add back. So we'd make Strenna with Glamour or without using Snowdrop in hand. Then we'd use Strenna effect, attach a material, normally the Princess, add back Lonefire, effect of Snowdrop in hand, special summon itself by tributing monster, and special summon the Lonefire again, and then use the Lonefire for a second time in that turn, tributing either Strenna or itself, depending on the situation, summon a Rosewhip from your deck. So all the combo lines will generally get to the exact same situation end board, and depending on what you want, you can go for, let's say, if you've used Die as well, you can add back Lonefire and just summon the Rosewhip, or summon it with Snowdrop, both side.
Rosewhip is such a crazy card. It's so good.
Some people don't seem to realize that Rosewhip plus Regulus essentially says no to all spells and traps.
True.
Because Regulus negates the effect of spell and trap, not the activation. So if they activate it and you negate with Regulus, let's say they activate like a Runic Tip, negate with Regulus, they can't activate any more spells and traps in general for the rest of that turn, even though their 1 has been negated. Which means your then Sheet, your Princess, your Strenna, your Bang Lancer can just deal with the monster negates, which generally aren't that threatening.
Yeah, this combo is definitely really good. And then going second again, just being able to have Con plus the Glamour is always going to be really solid as well. Just being able to tribute cards off your opponent's board, having a really solid first turn board, and then again, other cards left in hand. That's the type of combo that I really enjoy, honestly, the way you can hold a lot of your advantage. You do burn through most of your extra deck during the combo, but at the same time, it's like break the board. So if they can't, it's rough.
Yeah, and even though you've gone through a stretch deck, you still have plenty of follow-up because you still have Princess rewarding back every single turn, getting glamours, getting Mudan to get glamours. You've got Concon setting from deck every turn. You've got Strenna, which if you keep it, is able to add back Sheet every turn. I think a good thing with Concon as well is going second. People don't realize how valuable Sheet is because some decks really struggle to play around the tribute for cost.
Yeah, there's 2 other things I want to mention too, and one is going to be the Bang Lancer being able to reborn itself as well for follow-up. And then also, I think it's really good too that you did mention the sheet because I think a lot of people really hyper focus on like breaking the board and OTKing, but there's a lot of situations where you're not able to OTK, and this is something where like even if you're going second in striker, sometimes you put in like there can be only one because if you break the board, like the initial board your opponent puts up, and then set up a there can be, or if you have like a Rikka sheet, there's not a whole lot that your opponent's really doing on their turn.
Yeah, and then especially in those kind of situations, you're then reborning Petal and you have Concon set from deck and Petal Search. you're gaining back advantage and like Bengalancer Reborn, which also comes up with going first combos. Sometimes you need an initial tribute and to have a monster that you want to tribute. You can just make Bengalancer Reborn it back during your turn. But in general, because you've got so much follow-up in this deck, even with like Therion, you can add Lily and then equip Regulus to get negate like in follow-up. There's so much you can do follow-up wise that the deck is just in general very, very scary.
Yeah, there's a lot of different decks that you just don't want to hop in the grind game with, and this is one of them. So you definitely want to make sure that you can go ahead and get the OTK off, because if you can't, it's going to be a rough time.
Yeah, I think another thing to note very quickly that people do forget is sowing in graveyard. That Bengalancer is actually protected from battle and card effect.
Yep.
And everyone, I think a lot of people fall for that, especially with like crashing, for example, or trying or having they have the field spell for um it used to happen with Tyranids, but now it happens with Kashtira if they have the field spell to gain some attack. They try and attack over your Bengalancer with Unicorn. So their XYZs don't get hit when they make XYZs and they just crumble to it. The
Yeah.
unfortunate thing with Bengalancer is that it can't target monsters with zero attack, so technically it can't target Shangri-La, but especially if they have the field spell, which gives it a few hundred attack, that isn't an issue.
Yeah, it's definitely some really cool interaction from the deck, and I really do just like this deck in general. It really does quite a bit. Then we were talking a bit too about the fact that you can go for a nice OTK in this list as well. So if we want to go ahead and cover that too.
Yeah, so I think this is just like a very short combo, a very, very basic. The deck, without going into like any of your real like engine resources with Rikka, you can just get up this like very quick, very potent OTK. So quite simply, you just summon the three monsters of the Dryas, make a Melius with them, summon back Loci, make Thrasher. Thrasher becomes 3,200 by targeting Melius. Melius gives the Thrasher 300, gives it two attacks, 24 for Bengalancer. And then you have more than 8,000 damage on board. Even if they have a monster, let's say they have a Baron, one really cool thing with this is you're only locked into plants from extra deck right now. Thrasher is actually GGYGO Guardian. So they have one thing that comes up quite often is against, for example, Sword Soul. They might have if you've impermed them, they may have, let's say, a Moe plus a Baron. And you can bait out the Baron and then go for this OTK. You can then go effect bounce the Moe, battle phase, attack over the Baron. Then Thrasher will summon the Baron to your field. It's still game. People rarely Nibiru this deck correctly. If you're going to Nibiru this deck, always summon the token underneath an extra monster zone. Never summon it in any of the other zones because it will just be tributed as cost for Jasmine.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a fair point. There's a lot of things that everyone does just to go ahead and play around things. Like you gotta play around Mech Knights, right? And you gotta play around Anima. Like there's so many things. So definitely another thing to add to the laundry list of things that you definitely want to go ahead and just play around just inherently. So putting the Nibiru token under the EMZ, definitely a really good tip.
100%, yeah. It's definitely something that you should get into the habit of against Plant. Especially with Plants, it's one of those decks where there's a lot of like niche interactions that the opponent just might not know that will allow you to just play through things where in theory you shouldn't be able to. For example, Dryas not being once per turn. This example with the Nibiru token being summoned. Another one which I think is really, really crucial is because of Dryas' effect. Dryas, when you take damage, can reborn back. Can summon from extra deck and you gain back the life points. Um, People summoning monsters in in defense position. Against plan, summon everything in attack no matter what, so that they can't just crash the Dryas and then just summon a free monster and then potentially make a Jasmine or a Dance Fiona or something along those lines.
Yeah, that card's crazy too. I've been seeing that card gain a lot of popularity. It's very good. The Sylvan Link too.
Yeah, Silverlink 2, especially in this deck, it's even if you miss the 3 mills, just being able to manipulate things and then overlay for Strenna or overlay for your Teardrop and out things, it's just a valuable card. And it synergizes really well with Snowdrop as well.
So let's go ahead and talk about the list then. All right, so now we're back with the list here. If you want to talk about anything that you find that really sticks out, I definitely like Droll this format. I think that it's really strong, that card in general, especially if you can go ahead and OTK very easily. It's a card that you definitely should be running. The amount of searches this format, let alone next format, is going to be really prominent, so Droll is going to be really popular. Let's touch on the fact that we're on 45 cards here. And why you think that's going to be more optimal for the deck, main decking things like evenly in tactics, just a couple different things that I would like just to see how they're going to really propel the deck forward.
So the reason 45 cards is quite simply we've always found 45, even with like the European Championship list that won. Um, all these lists have been playing around 44, 45 cards. I've got as high as 47 for some regionals that I've topped. Because you want 40 cards can get pretty messy with plant ratios to non-engine ratios. Because you don't want to see too many plants. You'd rather have a more of a mix, and we've always found you clog a lot less. Because you have so many cards that access loci, you don't mind going higher in cards. Because you've got glamour, you've got loci, you've got die, you've got one for one, and then you've just got your general Jasmine summoning Lone Fire, then Lone Fire choosing the Jasmine summoning loci and be able to combo it that way as well. You pretty much always have access to loci. That isn't too much of a concern. So 45 is mainly for the mix between non-engine and engine and allowing you to side optimally. With the non-engine in this list, obviously it can vary between formats. For this, I preferred to have, I think Evenly is such a blowout card that I didn't want, I thought I had to main that. And because I was mainly Evenly, I didn't want any other cards that were going to be dead when I go first, because I didn't want to open multiple dead cards. So every other non-engine card is at least useful going first or second here. So for example, Droll, Imperm support the board. Tactics helps to be your hand trap because hand traps going up in usage right now, especially going to Syac format. There's so many hand traps. I think Tactics becomes really good. Imperm just generally held as because you can break boards quite easily with Concon and then just move really lots of Bengalancer, Teardrop, etc. You're quite happy just to hold the evenly as and use the evenly as a board breaker if you can't guarantee it's going to work as a hand trap. And draw is in there because the best explanation for draw is no, it doesn't stop comboing quite often. It limits the board to a point where you can just win with your board breakers or your concons or your engine. And this deck doesn't really mind too much about draw does hurt, but it can definitely be played around with things like Petal, sending Princess from deck to grave. If you have the Concon, you can Concon set from deck and still have Sheep with Tribute. You can still have, for example, your Loci. If your Loci search Sowing is your first search, you're still going to have multiple interrupts from that.
So looking at this list too, I don't see Painful Decision either. Is that because of the fact that we started focusing heavier on the Rikka cards versus just like the Sun Avalon package?
It's more because both Petal and Loci and even Lonefire are equally good normal summons, and we didn't need any more. And
Fair.
you have plenty of Loci access in this list. Arguably, you could play one Painful Decision. I did try this when I was playing Thrust in the main. You could play one Painful Decision for Thrust, but personally, I never found it was needed.
Understandable, understandable. Yeah, just trying to look at a few different things that have changed from the previous builds to now. We do see the Rose Whip in the side, and then also the Spider Orchid. I was talking to you a little bit about that beforehand. I thought that's really cool. If you want to go ahead and explain what that card is and what it does.
So Spider Orchid, it has a monster effect, which is an end phase search. That isn't as relevant though. The main reason to play Spider Orchid is because it's a level one and it's essentially an MST for face-up spell and traps in the spell trap zone, not field spells, which is worth noting. This means that, for example, Birth, it's really good at outing Birth, which can be a bit annoying in the grind game, because unfortunately you don't inherently have an out for continuous spells and traps in this deck within your engine. So you can search out it for Birth, you can search it for Skill Drain. In the future, we're going to be able to search it for Super Heavy Samurai Scales, or any Pendulum Zone cards, which will help grind game. It's searchable from Glamour Tribute 2. You can add both Petal and the Petal Plant to pop. You can add it off Jasmine to pop again. It's just a very nice utility card that just gives the deck more options into breaking boards.
Yeah, I think that card's really cool. Like I was saying before too, it's kind of like an eccentric in a way. Also, talking about some of the options in your sideboard, I do see the Herald of the Abyss. I do like that a lot because, especially next format with Purely, there's going to be a lot of situations where that card just becomes relevant. Even talking about things like Arise Heart, just having that as an option in the deck, I think is really worthwhile.
Yeah, so the original reason Herald of the Abyss came in is because I'm playing two Kaijus here, and one Herald of the Abyss and then three Thrust. The Herald of the Abyss is essentially just an out to, let's say, Kashtira, or like anything that has like Forbidden Lance, for example. If they have Lance, just out it. So essentially, for me, it was in this list for this format, it's another Kaiju, but it becomes out to the Permanent Monster as well. You can search out Thrust, because that then Kaiju hand traps. And Thrust in general just gives Thrust more utility. because I have multiple utility cards for Thrust here, and it just further expands and makes that card really, really good going second.
Yeah, and just to kind of expand on this a little bit too, for anyone who's unclear what we mean by Herald of the Abyss is like amazing versus alliance situations. It's because Herald of the Abyss, it directly affects the player and not the card. So the player has to send a monster with the type and attribute and not the card itself being unaffected. So this is why it also clears the purely towers, because again the player has to send it to the graveyard, not the card being unaffected by a card.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing as you're able to banish towers off of evenly matched,
Yeah.
because they are choosing the card to banish. I think it's really nice in combination with, let's say, Concon, because Concon contributing as cost also outs quite a lot of towers quite easily. I believe there's going to be some going into next format, that where you'll have cards that are unaffected by activated effects that you're able to treat as costs. A good example of that in the past has been, for example, I can't remember the card name. I think Psychic Overlord.
Yeah. Punisher.
The Yeah, Punisher, that's it. Yeah. It's unaffected by activated effect. So I think that kind of interaction is very relevant coming up. And then so Thrust in general, it just makes it even more of a toolbox card. You could search Regeki, Dark Ruler, you could search Duster for the back row matchups, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think it's really good. Looking at the rest of the list, though, do you think that tactics is really important in this deck? Just because I feel like this probably gets hand trapped quite a bit. So it's probably a pretty nice one just to look at the rest of the hand and be able to make the rest of your board around what they have.
So especially since you're playing multiple engines with like the Rikka engine, and Unexpected Die, having the tactics is really, really nice. Because it means, especially because your interrupts could be quite linear or like quite basic interrupts at times, it means you getting that full knowledge of their hand and then playing on even less cards because they'll end up with 3 cards in hand that they've hand trapped. That's just really valuable, as well as just the take control effect is absurd in this deck because you can then take control and distribute it off with Jasmine, for example. Or I think one's relevant into fusion decks, for example, the tier players that still exist, take their Predator Plant monster, and then you can then use that as a plant link monster. Things like that do come up quite often.
So another thing that's really cool with tactics too is if you're under draw, then you have a really good opportunity to look at your opponent's hand, get full hand knowledge, rip another card of their hand, so they only start with 4. So if you do have Con plus a Rikka and cheat, then you're in a very advantageous position.
Yeah, so I agree with that fully. I think it's especially important since like with that hand knowledge, because you're ending on sheet plus princess, and with Concon or with like you maybe on the Fang Lancer, it just depends on it depends on how you started. Generally, you'll be able to tribute as cost or back or have Fang Lancer bounce. And because those interruptions are a little bit more linear, they're not like blanket effects. Having full hand knowledge means that makes those interrupts 10 times more valuable. And it just wins games on its own. Especially going second if you get drawled, being able to take their monster, and then, for example, for a Baron, then being able to pop their card is also just insanely valuable. You're also basing out a spell negate then, which you can then use. One thing this deck is really, really good at is basing out spell negates because you've got so many powerful spells, which means then your sewing can just resolve freely and you can just end on a load of things.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely a really cool deck list here. A lot of different things that I feel like are really good for going first or second. That's why I really like playing decks like this too. So you have the ability to go second and not feel like you're already just going to lose the game. There's definitely a few different decks out there that are like that. Unfortunately, where it's like I better go first, but if you don't, then it's unfortunate. Con, of course, just being such a crazy card into any board. But any final thoughts about the deck?
Honestly, not really. I think the side can definitely it's one of those where it can definitely be adjusted depending on like the format. For example, I think and one really valuable thing is because this deck has so many flexible spots going into other formats like let's say next format where Droll and Ogre and hand traps are so valuable. Just having all these flex slots, for example, the Evenlies, the tactics, the call by, even some of the engine like one princess, one petal, could just be more hand traps or engine cards and just the deck is really good at adapting to the format.
Yeah, Ogre in X format is gonna be a crazy card. I'm very excited for that.
And one thing with this deck is this deck, sure, it can hit the Concon set from deck, but at that point you already have plenty of interrupts set up to stop that. And so Ogre pretty much doesn't do anything against this deck, realistically.
It's definitely going to be a good utility next format, Droll and Ogre. It's definitely great to have so much knowledge in one video, just so many different people when they play against the deck that they're going to be a lot more careful with their interrupts and really know what to negate, where to negate, what to banish. And that's one thing that it's always going to be a surprise when you play against something new, but you take knowledge that you gain from different channels and playing the game and really apply that to the match that you're in. Because even if you don't know what the deck is, you can make a lot of assumptions about what's in the deck and what the deck is trying to do, and really be able to play your best in those situations.
Exactly, yeah.
So I do appreciate everyone for joining us today. If you haven't already checked out Jessica's YouTube or Twitter, please go ahead and subscribe. This is going to be an amazing time to really be able to gain a lot of knowledge. Again, I really prefer that everyone checks out everyone's channels just for different viewpoints and different ideas, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to help each other get better. So this is something that we really want to make sure that you have the knowledge to be able to do.
But for now, I've just kept plant content up, but I do plan on branching out very soon. So, and especially for plants and how to play against that deck, as that maybe rise in popularity now, I think it's very good, even if you don't play the deck, just to learn how to beat it, because seemingly very few people do right now.
Well, I do appreciate you for joining me today. I hope that everyone has a wonderful night, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.